Claire ate a huge scorpion in Mexico.
Getting used to the lifestyle and letting go of the old lifestyle was probably the biggest challenge.
Little village right up in the mountains, and it's almost unlike anything else that you'll get in the world. It was just like a little slice of Eden.
You're listening to the GHT Overland podcast. We're releasing this episode on one of the most important days of the year, Thanksgiving Day. Our most sincere gratitude for you. Your time and overwhelming support is humbling, so thank you.
A tenaciously warm hug to all of you who sent such warm, positive messages after last week's episode. So thank you, and we hope this week's episode provides some laughs, probably a few gasps, and of course, so many rich lessons from years of experience overlanding by our guests.
Quite a unique perspective, going back 18 months just as COVID was settling in. An episode of perspective, deep knowledge as we share many laughs and a few "you did what?" moments.
You're about to listen to an episode sitting on my computer going through the kind of epic journey that forges resilience with unrelenting pain. It's embarrassing that such a powerful conversation was never published for you until today. However, it is today and our futures that we have control over. So it is with much excitement that we present this week's guests, James and Claire, with This Big Road Trip. And just as a quick note, a bit of a change worth noting going forward. We've always split episodes up, staying roughly about 30 minutes per episode. Unless we hear otherwise from you, we're going to switch that, where all episodes with a conversation with a guest are going to be all together as one episode. So, although there's several reasons to switch up our formatting, ultimately it's up to you who we produce the show for. So do let us know your thoughts, along with any specific people that you would like to hear on the show. And yes, I'm trying to entertain Laria. She is very energetic right now. So sorry for any noises that you may or may not hear. Lisa, are you ready for this episode that's been sitting on this computer for 18 months?
I'm ready.
Welcome and thank you for joining us on the GHT Overland podcast. This is where you get the greatest interviews and insights from overland travelers around the globe, learning from their stories and experiences as we interview overlanders from places like Australia, Africa, the Americas, Portugal, and today down in Colombia. You will learn the basics to the advanced in overlanding, so buckle up and get ready for a new adventure. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lisa. Today's featured guests are James and Claire of This Big Road Trip. Both are originally from the UK, then moved to BC, Canada in 2006. Now here's where things get interesting.
Claire is a family physician, and James is an endurance athlete sports coach focused on Ironman triathlon racing. Both are able to maintain their professional careers as they travel, and I'm sure we will get into those details a little bit later.
On the 1st of January in 2018, they left to start what they thought would be a 3-year road trip around the world, driving from Canada to Patagonia, shipping to South Africa, overlanding through the Middle East, the Stands, Russia, China, Mongolia, and Australia.
Oddly enough, just over 2 years later, they're hanging out in Colombia.
So I'm guessing that Pan Am is worth a slower pace.
I guess so. So Claire, James, welcome, and thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Hi guys, thanks very much for having us.
Yes, thank you. Hi.
Now, before we get too deep into the interview, Claire, I wanted to ask you, what is your take on the COVID situation there in Colombia, and how is that impacting your overland trip currently?
It came as a little bit of a surprise, like the rest of the world, I'm sure, to find ourselves now trapped in Colombia, and has put a complete halt to our trip at the moment. Things happened pretty quickly. We had to make some quick decisions as the situation escalated. One decision was our visa was running out, so did we make a quick dash across the border into Ecuador, where we would renew our visa and have 3 months, or did we stay put in Colombia? We had literally a few hours to make that decision. We made that decision and we stayed in Colombia, and with the situation in Ecuador at the moment, we're pretty pleased we did. The next decision was, do we stay in Colombia or do we go back to Canada? And so far we're staying put here in Colombia. Things where we are actually pretty much idyllic, I would say. We're stuck with about 30 other travelers on a farm, and we have everything we need. We have hot water, we have electricity, we have water to fill our tanks. We have an amazing family that's taking care of us from Morocco that live here. We have our food delivered once a week. We haven't left this place for just over 4 weeks, stepped outside the gates. And at the moment we feel really, really safe and secure. The situation in Colombia is difficult to gauge, just because I think they're not testing a lot of people, so the numbers look low, but probably they're actually a lot higher than they seem. But we're super safe here, and at the moment we have very little reason to return to Canada, since at the moment we have rented our apartment. We can both work on the road, so what we would do in Canada for work we do here. We don't have family in Canada, and the situation in Canada is probably similar, if not worse, to here, and we would be isolated there in an apartment. And at the moment we're isolated with a great group of people on a 3-acre farm where we can run and be outside. So at the moment we're staying put here in Colombia, but we'll see how things go.
Small farm, quiet, my kind of place.
Yep, just a skill saw running in the background. So in case I'm not able to edit that out, listeners are like, what is that noise in the back? So where we are, it's kind of like a sci-fi meets a Western, where like 70% of the people have gone to face masks and bandanas anytime they're away from home, even doing a solo road trip in their car going wherever they might be going. What is it like in Colombia?
It's kind of difficult for us to tell because initially, I guess a little bit of backstory is initially because of the situation here with our visa and our tip running out. And as most overlanders know, that's the temporary import permit that allows us to have the car in the country. Because they were running out, we were going to make a dash for the Ecuador border in order to get into a new country and have a new visa and a new tip, which should last us for a while. And if there was any lockdown, we thought that would be the best idea. We didn't actually do that, but the reason I mention it is because other travelers were doing the opposite. They were coming from Ecuador into Colombia, and because they'd only just arrived in the country, it meant that then, in theory or in practice, they should have been in quarantine. So they made a dash for this campsite, knowing that it was a good place to be. Arrived here, and effectively the authorities came and said, hey, you guys, because you've just come into the country, you really ought to be in quarantine. Because you're all here together, that kind of means that you all have to be in quarantine. So that happened before any of the lockdown happened in Colombia. So when in the days prior to us arriving here, it was pretty much normal everywhere. When the last day that we were actually outside the campground, there was a couple, and we went to get some supplies, went to get diesel, went to get some groceries. There was a couple of people wearing masks, and that was about it. Out the whole town, maybe I saw 5 or 6 people wearing something.
Okay.
But when we got back here, we've been here ever since. So all of the craziness that's going on in Bogota, all of the bigger cities, all of the lockdown, we haven't really seen any of that. So it feels kind of strange in that we know that that stuff's going on out in other countries and in this country, but we haven't really seen any of it.
Got it. Okay. Super interesting. So we'll be ready. Lisa, did you have something?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was ready for my question, but I'm seeing a little.
I'm just ready for things to go back to normal. So hopefully that happens soon and borders open up fairly soon.
What inspired overlanding for you guys?
It was really a two-part process. One was snowbirding. So it was actually Claire that we moved to Canada for partly for snowboarding. We love Canada. We love living in Kelowna. The snow is something that we loved at first. And then as we got into triathlon more and more, the snow became a real pain. So Claire's patients used to come in around October, November, getting all of their checks done to go south snowbirding. And Claire was like, well, we should do that. Why can't we do that? So we looked into it and then decided we bought a truck and a big trailer, headed down to California every year for a few months, waited for the snow to clear and then came back up to Kelowna again. And after a couple of years, we felt that we'd kind of seen as much as we wanted to see of the RV parks that we were staying in for longer periods of time. We kind of got bored being there, and we knew that there was all of this great off-roading and deserts and all of these other camping areas around Arizona, Utah, California that we couldn't really go to with what we had. So we started to look into, well, what could we take to those off-road places? And then the more Claire looked into it, the more she started to hear about the whole overlanding scene. And having traveled around the world before backpacking, it was something that really she loved the sound of. So I was sitting at my desk one day at home working, and I got a phone call from Claire and literally said, okay, we're going to drive around the world. What do you think? And I said, yeah, let's do it. So kind of a long story short. Yeah, awesome. Kind of. It was. She did say, "Do you want to?" But it was a loaded question, that's for sure.
You do, right? It's awesome, Claire. Good job. So, did you guys spend a lot of time planning before you left Canada, or did you just kind of pack everything up and hit the gas?
The process was long. So the process took about 18 months, but that wasn't 18 months of planning. That was just 18 months of, well, mainly waiting for our vehicle to be built. But then also closing down, selling. We had a house. We didn't want to have a house. So we sold the house. We sold most of our possessions, bought a condo, which when we lived in for 6 months, and then now we rent out. In terms of actually planning the journey, not a lot of planning went into it. We're the type of people who book a plane ticket and turn up and then figure things out. I find that just the best way to go. And I think with what we thought was going to be a 3-year trip, it was difficult to plan because it was long. Now that it's way more than a 3-year trip, it's good because things change. I mean, look at the situation we have now with Corona. So we just go by the flow, if that's the right phrase. And so, yeah, I mean, literally other than buying the bare necessities that you need to travel and pointing in a southerly direction, that was basically our planning.
I like it.
Yeah, I'd say that was right. Other than the truck, knowing, hey, when we go down from north to south, these countries are in the way and we'll be going through them. That's literally about as planned as we got. In fact, just to show you how off the rails any planning might have gone, our initial idea of being in the US was, we've been to the US before, spent lots of time on the West Coast. We'll spend 2 months there. We weren't that keen on Mexico, although it was okay when we went backpack there before, so we'll spend 2 months there. The US went from 2 months to 6 months, and we left almost the day that our visa ran out because we have an amazing time. And in Mexico, our 2 months became 8 months. So yeah, our plans were, even the very tiny bit of planning that we may have done at the start went straight out of the window. So we just don't plan at all anymore.
I like it. Lisa, you look confused.
I'm just in awe.
That's awesome. So I'd love to learn more about your truck and your camper setup. So, like, number one, are you happy with that setup? Is there anything that you'd change about it? And can you give us a little detail on the truck camper setup and maybe any name that you may have given it?
Okay, so yeah, I think that the answer to are you happy with it is depends whereabouts you are. One of the things that I've learnt in the couple of years that we've been away is everyone is happy and unhappy with their vehicle because there is no perfect vehicle for overlanding. Sometimes you want something smaller and sometimes you want something bigger and other times you want things that do this, that and the other. I think one of the things whenever I hear someone saying, you know, what vehicle should I get to do, especially for the Pan American, because we're on lots of Pan American forums and hear that question a lot, which vehicle should we get? And it really is just pick one that takes your fancy and run with it, because it doesn't matter whether you're dragging a trailer, whether you're in a standard Class C motorhome, whether you're in a tricked out Land Rover or one of those massive man trucks, you're going to enjoy the travel. The travel will be different according to the vehicle you have, but it doesn't make the travel right or wrong. So the answer to the question, are you happy with it? Overall, absolutely. I think that even when we reevaluated, because our truck was, and the camper would take, the camper was taking so long to build, we started to reevaluate, okay, is it the right thing? Is there another option? Blah, blah, blah. And we went through, we went to Expo the first time when we put a deposit down, and we also went to Expo the second time, and we're kind of saying it's going to be a big trip. It's our chance to look at everything and reevaluate, and we still went with this. And for what we've wanted to do, it's done everything either exceptionally well, really well, or quite well. So yeah, we're happy with it. We called the truck Sherpa. Most people call their vehicles a female name, or it's a female. Ours looked a little bit too tough to be called anything other than something tough like a Sherpa. So Sherpa, obviously, they're the guys in India and Nepal that carry everyone's equipment around when they're climbing mountains. So I thought, well, this truck's carrying all of our stuff around, so that makes it a good name. And also it's grey and white, and we had a cat that was called Sherpa, so that's why we called it Sherpa.
No, perfect. And so for the benefit of our listeners, why don't you go ahead and tell us what truck you have, what camper you have?
So the truck started life as a Ram 3500 long bed. It was one of the earlier models, 2007, which meant that we don't have any of the emissions control on there, which is kind of good for coming down here because you don't have to be too selective about which diesel you put in it. Cummins engine, a 5.9 turbo diesel, which has been absolutely incredible. It's a great engine. It's really powerful. It's great for all the mountains that we've been going up and overtaking trucks and stuff like that. So it started life as that. We then sent the truck to a guy in Sacramento called Tim Scully, who runs Scully Off-Road in Sacramento. We met him at one of the expos. He was an instructor for 7P and Camel Trophy area. He took our truck. I kept sending him various different bits and pieces for the truck, and he basically did a good restoration on the truck and also added all of those pieces on there. So we've really turned it into a bit of an off-road beast. We've added wheels, tires, new suspension from Icon Vehicle Dynamics. We had the truck taken to Diva Spring to uprate the rear springs to match the camper weight. We've got a big bumper, a winch, some lights. We've got lockers, front and rear, compressor for airing up and down. So it kind of looks the part, and which is great. But it kind of is built to go and not to get us into trouble, but more to get us out of trouble if we do get into trouble. Tim at Scully Off-Road did an absolutely amazing job, and the truck's been faultless ever since we left in the 2.5 years. The only thing that went wrong with the truck was an air conditioner compressor failed, which we had to replace, but nothing to do with Tim. All the stuff that he put on there was exceptional. Once that was done, once the truck was done, Tim drove it up to XP Camper, and they're the guys that made the camper for us. It's kind of, I guess it's a hand-built custom camper. It's kind of custom, but not very, in that you get to choose some of the options, but you don't really get to change the design of the interior of the camper, for example. So once they get the truck, they take off the bed of the truck, the standard truck bed, and they replace that with a flatbed with it's an amazing quality aluminum flatbed with storage boxes all the way around the outside and a great big pull-out storage slide-out drawer at the back, which can be used as a table as well. So that's a really nice part of the camper. And once they have the flatbed, they can then they drop on the XP camper. So the camper that we have, they do 3 different options. The most, I say popular, the most common one is the one that we have. It looks a little bit like a normal camper, a sliding camper that goes into a camper that you may see on a truck normally. But because it's a flatbed, rather than slide the camper in, they drop it down on top of the flatbed, and it means that we don't lose some of the space either side that the truck bed usually takes up when you slide a camper in. So it's quite roomy inside. The fact that it's a flatbed and dropped onto the flatbed means that the door can be on the side of the camper, which again allows a lot more variety in the layout. And so I guess, how would I describe the look of it? From the outside, it's made of fiberglass and it's all one piece. The bottom shell is all one piece and the top shell is all one piece. They slide down over the top of each other, a little bit like a soap dish or something like that. Where the top piece slides out down over the bottom. So it stays nice and low profile, it's nice and aerodynamic. When we get to a campsite, we hit a button and the roof raises up. So that top piece slides up over the outside of the bottom piece and it creates a nice big living area inside. It looks quite tall when the camper's raised and it's about 6'5" or something inside, so plenty of headroom. Nice. And on the inside, when everyone gets in the camper, the first thing they say is that this looks just like a boat, because the whole thing inside is all one piece mold of fiberglass. So the work unit, the shower area, some of the storage bits, it's all molded from one piece. And then from that one piece, they add in the various appliances, the sink and the stove and stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of our camper in a nutshell.
So Sherpa sounds quite handsome.
yeah, it is.
Handsome rugged truck with a beautiful camper on top.
There you go.
And so the room inside and everything, you guys don't feel claustrophobic at all?
No, we've but I like to say everything's en suite, so I don't know if that implies that I'm lazy or not, but I love the fact that everything's a stretched arm away. But yeah, it's not, I think for 2 people it's great. There's enough room for us to move around. There's a nice big dinette seating area, which one of us is usually there if the other one's moving around the camper. I like the fact that, as with most campers, the bed is over the top of the truck, which means the bed's set up all the time. So you can always throw yourself up there to have a read or a lay down, or if you're doing something on social media, whatever. So that gives you a little bit of extra space too. And because of how the camper's laid out, there's no separate rooms or there's no cupboards or storage at eye-line height. So the whole camper from the waist up is completely open, which gives it a really nice open feel. And we've got big windows, and then the tented area at the front of the camper has 3 big windows on each side. So when you open those up, it really does feel that it's kind of an outside-inside kind of feel. So the camper feels really spacious, which is great.
Oh, that's super cool. So I'm not familiar with the cooking setup in the camper. What does your cooking setup look like, and any recommendations for our listeners in putting something together?
So for our cooking, we have a Webasto cooking top. So that's diesel run.
Okay.
And like a lot of things with Overland, like James said with the vehicle, that there is never the perfect setup. So there are pros and cons to diesel, there are pros and cons to propane, and there are pros and cons to induction. And I think they're the three main cooking methods. So overall, we're really happy with our Webasto cooktop. We love the fact that we have a single fuel. So our truck runs on diesel, our heating runs on diesel, our hot water runs on diesel, our cooktop runs on diesel, which is great. There are some downsides in that the stove takes a little longer to warm up than if you just turned on your induction or turned on your propane flame. And the other problem with diesel, which we haven't had yet, but at high altitude and cold conditions, it can gel a bit and it can be difficult to run at those altitudes. So sometimes it clogs up and it doesn't work, which we haven't yet experienced, but we do know people that have. So it's good, but it has its limitations. I mean, induction, if you have an endless amount of electricity and solar and battery, I mean, induction is probably the way to go. And now with the lithium batteries becoming a lot better, that may be a better option in the future. Propane, I would say, is super reliable, but you have to carry a propane tank and you have to fill it and have all the right connections. And we also know people who travel with propane that have done so for years and have had absolutely no issues in sourcing propane. So they have their pluses and minuses, all of them.
I think one of the things I'd add about the Webasto, and Claire mentioned the fact that there's diesel gelling issues, which is true, but our Webasto has a separate fuel tank that's actually in the storage area of the camper itself, and that storage area is heated. And with regards to the clogging, that's something that happens, I guess, with lots of diesel things, but the injector over a period of time. So depending on how hot the diesel is burning and depending on the quality of fuel, over a period of time, the injector, for want of a better word, the injector where the fuel comes out can get clogged. So if, for example, you spend a lot of time at high altitude, the diesel isn't burning as well, and therefore you will end up with some soiling or some build up around the injector, and over a period of time that will start to build up more and more and more, and then it will need to be replaced. We've had the Webasto running at, they rate it to about 2,500 meters. They're usually used in boats. I think that's kind of what they were built for, which is obviously sea level. We've had it, they rate it to 2,500 meters, which is kind of where we're at now, but we've had it running handsomely at 4,000 plus meters, and have never had any issues with it. If you run it for extended periods of time at that level, then the build up is going to get more and more. But we spoke to Webasto, they set us up with a full service kit, and I think for like $100 we have all of the pieces that we can just go underneath the stove, take the bits off that need fixing and bolt on a new one, and we'll be good to go again. So yeah, it does have some disadvantages. As long as you know what they are in advance and you have the means to correct them, I think the Webasto is a great option. Like Claire said, electricity, if you've got lots of that, and induction's a great option, and propane, if you are good at getting the different valves and stuff that you need to make the connection, then that's a good option as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sounds good.
What is that one thing you value the most, either on or in your vehicle?
We couldn't, I don't think we could come up with just one.
Claire, because she does the cooking. That's my most that's my most valuable item. Yes, I couldn't live without her.
And I couldn't live without him because he fixes everything. So I guess we're a really good team. So other than Annie drives, because I'm a terrible driver, but other than ourselves, I would say the solar and the water filtration system. So I think most other things you can go out and find or figure out other ways of getting, but having a huge water tank and a 4-stage filtration system for water, we can take water from anywhere. We could take it from a lake or taps, and we filter it, and we don't buy any bottled water, and we always have fresh, clean drinking water, which is amazing. And then the solar, just because we use a fair amount of electricity because we work. We need to charge our equipment regularly. And yeah, having the solar is great. We have, I don't know how much we have. How much do we have of solar and batteries?
We've got 4 by 300 amp 6 volts, which means that when we set them up to be 12 volt, we've got 600 amp hours. But obviously it's not lithium, so you can only use around 50% of your battery power, otherwise you'll degrade them, which gives us around 300 amp hours. But yeah, I mean, I think the nice thing with the amount that we have, I mean, it's not a huge amount. And occasionally if we're in somewhere where there hasn't got a lot of sun and we're going to be stationary for a long period of time, occasionally, very occasionally, like a couple of times a year, we might be somewhat careful with our electricity use. But we have enough that usually we just don't even think about it. We just use it all the time. And, you know, we leave lights on, or we do this, that and the other, whereas some people may not do that. And of course, it's connected to our truck as well. And we move, despite the fact that we spend a lot of time in countries. Claire seems quite obsessed. We're looking at every single town in every single country. So we end up moving quite a lot. And because our truck also recharges the batteries, electricity has never really been something that we've had to worry about. So yeah, the water, having water and power is great. It means, it means we don't have to worry about those two things.
And anything you originally packed that you now never use or have removed from your overall setup?
Yes. So we had a secondary fridge in the back of our truck. So we have a really, really good sized, I would say, normal type fridge a normal RV fridge as opposed to a normal household fridge. But it's a really good size.
Yeah, it's a Dometic fridge freezer. It's got a reasonable amount of space at the bottom and then a freezer compartment at the top. And it's kind of the size that it's an under counter fridge that goes from counter to floor, so it's quite a reasonable size already.
But other people that were buying this setup seemed to buy a secondary fridge and put it in the back of the truck. So we bought a Snowmaster fridge, but actually when we were in Bogota, so maybe 2 months ago, we barely used this fridge, we were just basically storing like dried produce in it as an extra storage place. So it was
a very expensive cupboard, basically.
Yeah, basically. So we actually sold it in Bogota, and we got someone to build us an amazing proper storage unit in the back of our truck. So that was probably the main thing that we carried that we got rid of.
Yeah, everything else. Our trip started off slightly weirdly in that we were supposed to start with the camper from Canada, but because the camper just was taking so long to get ready and wasn't ready, we ended up leaving Canada in a massive U-Haul truck. It was this 30-foot long U-Haul truck. It was the only thing that we could find that they would allow us to take and leave over the border. So we had this huge U-Haul truck with about 7 plastic crates of stuff floating around in the back. So we were quite lucky in that I guess that forced us to think about what we actually need. So because we knew we would have to end up throwing it away, we thought quite carefully about it before we left, threw all of our stuff in those crates. We didn't really know how much space we had, so we tended to err on the side of not taking very much because we had no idea if it would all fit. So when we got down to the camper, we found out we actually had more storage than we thought. We had plenty of room, so we didn't end up taking anything with us that we needed to get rid of. So yeah, there was really the fridge and a few other bits and pieces that we might have, just tiny bits and pieces we may have thrown along the way.
Okay, cool. So of all the places that you've been, what are your current top 2 or 3 destinations that really stand out to you, along with maybe a little detail on what made them so special?
extremely hard question. Okay, places, I would say, in general terms, we absolutely love the southwest of the United States. So Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, the camping and the off-road driving and the scenery was unbelievably stunning. I don't know.
I don't think people realize how amazing in the US. I think they know that it's great, but I don't think they realize just how unique and how amazing it is. And for camping and that kind of thing, it's just mind-blowingly good. The fact that you can literally just be driving down a road and say, I'm done for the day and I'm going to camp right there, and then just pull off the road and go and make up a camp in a nice environment. It really is a special place.
So that was Utah. Then I would say, in terms of countries, Mexico and Colombia have definitely been the best countries. They have absolutely everything, both these countries, and we constantly compare these two countries to each other. I mean, they have, in terms of their landscapes, they have jungles, they have deserts, they have mountains, they have snow, they have
beaches.
I mean, they have it all. And then to top it off, the people in both those countries are absolutely phenomenal. And the food in those countries is absolutely phenomenal. So country-wise, in terms of maybe more specific places,
we went to there was an incredible, and it's not very I guess it's overland because we overlanded there, but we went to a town called Pueblo Bello, which is in Santa Marta. No,
I don't know what it's on the kind of
Sierra
northern
Nevada.
Yeah, it's in the Sierra Nevada.
So it's basically in Colombia. It's just a little bit further up north, right up in the mountains. It's called Pueblo Bello, and when we went there, we were told about it by someone else. We went there, managed to find I guess it's kind of a hotel or a finca where we were allowed to stay. And then when we went into the town, there's a massive amount of indigenous people in the town with these beautiful white hats and white cloaks and white trousers, these special bags that they make, that they have 2 or 3 of these bags. The men all have some kind of black straight facial hair, and they all carry these little they're like little pots and sticks that they have some kind of coca mix in there. It's not cocaine, but it's kind of a coca plant mix. And it was just like this other, I guess it was a tribe that was in a Colombian village, but it was great to see them there. Claire ended up talking to one of the tribal elders who came to where we were camping, and she was talking to us, and it was kind of a little bit of an interview in, do we want to let these people in? She took to Claire and arranged for us to go and stay in I don't want to call it a town, an area called Nabusimaki, which is a tiny little village right up in the mountains, and it's almost unlike anything else that you'll get in the world. It is just like a little slice of Eden where there is no real input from the outside world, and never has been forever. The houses are all these little round thatched mud houses where the I can't remember how to say their name. Awakas tribe live, and the place is just immaculate. Like everything looks like the most perfectly manicured landscape, but it's all natural. And there's no like electrical pylons. There's no signs of the modern world up there. It was a crazy motorbike ride up the worst road I think I've ever been on, up this mountain to get there. And yeah, it was a really amazing time. We basically stayed with the family of the elder that we met down in the town. And it was just, I mean, when we were there, at night we went back into our room, And we just stared at each other and thought, this is a hugely unique opportunity to come and stay somewhere like this, because there is just none of these places left in the world, or very, very, very few. So that was an incredible experience. It wasn't an experience that we spent in our camper. I would have loved to be able to take our camper up there and camp in there, but it would have also kind of spoiled, I guess, the scene of having this modern thing in such a, for want of a better word, a medieval looking village. But that was an incredible time. So yeah, that was definitely a highlight.
Yeah. And the other place we liked, which was really, really surprised by, was the Osa Peninsula in Costa Rica. Never been someone to really, really want to go to Costa Rica because I thought it was going to be a bit too touristy for us. But down at the very southwest tip is this peninsula, which is, again, fairly untouched, no big developments, fairly raw, and just teeming with wildlife. It was absolutely amazing. You can camp on the beaches, and we would have huge macaw parrots, like they were almost like pigeons. There were so many of them flying around in the trees, and we parked on this beach one night to camp, and from our camper we had the macaws in the sky, we had turtles in the bay swimming, where we actually went and swam and they were right next to us, dolphins, and then also, because it was humpback whale season, the whales breaching that we just watched out of the back of the camper. And it was, and we were alone, and it was phenomenal, and it was beautiful.
Costa Rica was one of these places that you hear about, and I just thought it's one of the places that I want to rush through. Everyone said it, not everyone overlanding, but people have said, oh, it's quite expensive. We knew it was very touristy because so many people have been there, but it wasn't touristy in a bad way. It was kind of low-key local tourism, quite environmentally friendly minded. And overall, it was way less touristy than I thought it was going to be. It was a great country to travel in, great food, friendly people. But that Osa Peninsula really was a standout place where lots of people have even been to Costa Rica were like, well, we'd never heard of it. Where is it? And I cannot believe that you would go to Costa Rica and not go there. And for overlanding, it was incredible. Costa Rica is actually quite big into their overlanding. Lots of locals have SUVs or something like that with a roof rack. They all have their little shower. I don't know if you've seen for want of a better word, a pipe full of water with a shower head on one end. So they're quite into their camping. And in Costa Rica, even if you don't want to drive there, or you don't have an overland vehicle, you can just turn up in Costa Rica and they rent the 4x4s with rooftop tents, or they'll rent truck campers. So you can actually go there and enjoy all of the overland trails, of which there is quite a few in Costa Rica. And you can get out into the middle of nowhere and enjoy that kind of camping, even if you don't have an overland vehicle. Highly recommended. The Osa Peninsula is a stunning area.
That is super cool.
I'm salivating.
Salivating?
Yeah, drooling.
Awesome.
Like, oh. So while you're traveling, what's that?
Speak of salivating.
I
Go
know,
ahead, sorry.
right? Right on my direct line. So during your travels, what's a favorite meal or recipe you've enjoyed?
Ooh, favorite meals. We like trying the local stuff wherever we go. Favorite? Do you mean favorite meal that we have in a country, or favorite meal that we actually create ourselves?
Both.
Both. What?
Favorite meal that you cook yourself?
Oh.
Okay, it has to be spaghetti bolognese. It has been for the last, what would you say,
ever since I've known you, like 30 years. Yeah, it's kind of been our go-to.
It is our go-to, and it's super easy to make. And I mean, it's very, very easy to find. What do you call it in the US? Call it different to the UK. Ground beef.
Minced beef.
Ground beef. We've been able to find that everywhere, so it's really easy to find.
Beef's also a fairly safe meat to buy as well.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter if it's been out in the sun a little bit or not kept really, really chilled. And then, I mean, you can, everywhere we've been, you can find the tomatoes and the peppers and onions, and then your rice or spaghetti to go with it, pasta. So I would say it's been a staple throughout our life, and it continues to be a staple on our trip. And it's nice because you'll make a big batch and then, keep it for the next day or put it in the freezer. And then generally in each country, we just try the local stuff, whatever available at the markets, on the street foods, in the local little restaurants.
Claire ate a huge scorpion in Mexico. We went into a market in Mexico, and it was the market where they have the weird stuff. Apparently there's markets in Mexico where it gets even weirder, but this one was kind of a fairly well-known one. It was fairly close to where we were staying in Mexico City. Yeah, it was the one with the weird stuff, but the weird stuff that people actually eat, as opposed to the weird stuff that they might only go and look at for fun. So yeah, we went around, and there was nice food, normal food, and then there was some stores that had some of the more exotic stuff that they might eat, things like insect-based things, which, well, the scientists say could become a way of feeding populations because they're very good, high in protein and stuff like that. So it was kind of weird to see grasshoppers or crickets being sold, and they're sold everywhere in Mexico as a standard snack, which sounds so weird to us, but in reality it's just something crunchy that they've got a flavoring on, like some sort of flavoring, salt and lime that they cover them with. So you end up just having something crunchy that tastes of salt and lime. But we got to this stand, and it had the usual crickets or stuff like that, and then it had some scorpions, and again, I don't know what they do to them, but they're fairly dry, and they just flavor them with something else. So the guy was trying to get us to try one, and I looked at Claire, and I was kind of pointing to these little scorpions that must have been about 1 inch or 2 inches long, and Claire went, "No, I want that one." It was about 5 inches long, this big black scorpion with huge pincers. I was like, "You've got to be kidding me!" But yeah, she ate it all, I think. She was braver than me.
That is awesome. Okay.
It's not a staple, though.
That's not a staple, and it probably wasn't our favourite either.
What it tastes like?
Tacos.
Chicken.
Yeah, what was it?
No, it did crunchy. I would say it was more of a texture than a taste.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I'm going to stick with my cashews.
Okay. I would probably agree.
Yeah, I think that's a wise idea.
Hygiene. You might need this after you eat a scorpion. What's your setup? Any recommendations?
I'm guessing by hygiene you mean kind of personal hygiene, showering, washing, that kind of thing. So we run a lot. Every day we run, usually at least 6 days a week, sometimes 7, sometimes 5. We normally do something like, depending on where we are and how easy it is to run and the terrain, we do anywhere between 40 and 80 kilometers a week of running. So we shower every day. And yeah, we shower every day. We have a shower inside the camper in a little wet room area near the toilet. But we've used that, I think, twice since we've been away, maybe 2 or 3 times. They also have an outdoor shower that comes out the back of the camper, and we use that all the time. Even when we've been in plazas or whatever, we've got kind of no self-conscience anymore about dragging that out and giving ourselves a hose down. So yeah, it's kind of easy. It's one of those things that you just kind of get on with, and I think people who don't overland or camp might look at that and think, "Oh, I couldn't do that," but you just get used to it very quickly.
So I think for me, definitely toilets is, for me, it's essential. We know lots of people that don't travel with the toilets, but I love having the luxury of having a toilet, and it has a cassette, so we just take that out. We have something called a SOG, which is basically when we open the trap to the toilet, the little fan comes on and it creates an air passage from inside the camper through the cassette of the toilet and vents it outside. That means that you don't get any odor in the camper. And it also means that we don't need to put any chemicals in our cassette toilet, which means that we can dump, and we only pee in our cassette, by the way. It means we can dump it anywhere because it doesn't have any chemicals. So you can dump it in like composting toilets, or you can just dump it, out in nature because it only has urine in it. So that's a huge advantage to our toilets. And I don't think a shower is essential for most people. I think it's a nice luxury. But there's also places you can always find a shower. So I think, if you didn't have a shower in your setup, for most people, it wouldn't be a problem.
I think sometimes as well, obviously overlanding is a very broad scope. So people who overland in the US, for example, may have a bit of a weird idea about what is and isn't available as you come further south to developing countries. So when you come in the US, the camping's available everywhere, and the idea is that you don't go into campsites. As you come further south, then sometimes the wild camping can be very limited because all of the land is owned by people. You don't have BLM land, for example. So lots of the land is owned by people. Sometimes there's great camp spots in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes you're camping in, say, a national park or something. Sometimes you're in a village where it's fairly small and there is a great place on the outside of the village to go and camp. But quite often you will end up staying at a place where they're used to having overlanders. It may not necessarily be a campground, but there are campgrounds, there are hotels that will allow you to stay in the car park. There will be restaurants that you go and buy a meal there, and they're happy for you to stay overnight in their car park next to the restaurant. And quite often they'll have a shower or toilets or whatever. So the people who don't travel, or they're traveling, say, in a vehicle with a rooftop tent, there's quite often they're staying in a place where they are able to have a shower and there's toilets available as well. So yeah, I don't think that the hygiene is an issue. It's nice, obviously, the bigger vehicle you have, the more of those things you can have in there, and it's great that we can shower wherever we are regardless. The other nice thing, of course, is sometimes there might be a shower and toilet available, but you might really not want to use them. We've had a few of those before, so it is great having your own with you.
Okay, cool. So tell us about that number one biggest challenge you've had to overcome so far on the road.
I think James has had more challenges than me. I think getting used to the lifestyle and letting go of the old lifestyle was probably the biggest challenge. It seems so easy and so idyllic to just head off on this journey. And for some people it is, and I guess for some people it isn't. And it wasn't that James didn't want to do it. It just took a while to change over. And I think sometimes people are so fed up of their lives that they're living, they use this as an escape. But we had an amazing life in Canada. I mean, we had everything, and we were really, really happy. It's just me in particular wanted a change and wanted a new challenge and wanted to do something different. So I think that letting go of what you had before, getting into a rhythm of your new life, and we're not just traveling, we have a new life and a new lifestyle. So we're not just going from north to south in a year and being tourists and holiday makers the whole time. We've actually set up a new life where we continue to do our exercising, running every day. We continue to work every day, and all the other things, cooking and cleaning and finding food and fuel and water. So we have a whole new rhythm of life. So I think that was one thing that was more challenging for James than me.
And the other thing, I think I like having what's the word when you do the same thing every day?
Routine.
Oh yeah, I like having a routine. And then overlanding, sometimes it took me a while to find my routine, and it took me a while to just be happy with the things that we were doing. It felt a little bit like I was due to go back home sometime and carry on there. And if you ever feel like that, then sometimes you feel that what's happening at home is going on and you're missing out on it. You're not staying up with everything. And it felt a little bit like that. It felt like we were coming away, and when we were going to see the amazing stuff, great, it felt like there was a reason for me to be there. When we were just going from town to town and there wasn't anything amazing on the way, and we would just basically park up, we would stay in our camper for the day, the next day we'd pack down and move on. I just felt like, well, what are we doing? I don't understand what I'm doing. And it took a while for me to settle into the fact that what we were doing was living life and just in a different place every time. Ironically, when I went home, after we'd been traveling for about a year and a half, I went home to meet up some of my athletes, go and help out at Ironman Canada. When I went home and I saw the fact that I really wasn't missing out on anything moving forward. It was just home. It was the same as it always was. When I came back, I'd completely relaxed into traveling. And that made a big difference to me. I think that realizing that this is life. Stop thinking about what you used to do and start thinking about what you're doing now. And the other thing is that we obviously had a big discussion about how I felt, and then we slowed down a little bit. So rather than traveling what felt like every single day somewhere new, setting up, taking down, driving to the next place and doing the same thing over and over again, we kind of skip a couple of towns in between, drive to somewhere, the next place we're going to, and we might stay there 2, 3 or 4 days and get a feel for the town, have the people kind of know us and say hello when they see us again, and feel like, even though you're there a short time, feel like you're part of it for a little while. And really, I think that that's what I was missing out on. I'm missing out on feeling part of something. And the way we've changed our traveling now is it suits that a lot more. So yeah, that was a hard thing. Living together in a close quarters sounds really hard, and absolutely it can be, but we've always been really good, I think, that we're English, so we're not shy of having an argument if we need to have an argument. but we've known each other for so long, and that those arguments will flare up, and for most people that might take a week of placation afterwards to bring it back down again. But literally, we can have an argument, and then as soon as one person has finished talking, it will be completely back to normal straight away. And I think that's quite essential as well. You have to have that little bit of release. What else has been difficult? There are quite philosophical difficulties, I think, that we've had.
I think the other thing that you found difficult, because at the start everything was new with the camper and we didn't know what its weak points were. It was, we spent a reasonable amount of money on things, and now we're on our own, and James has never been mechanically minded or DIY. I don't know if you knew that, do it yourself minded. If something went wrong, we call someone, they come fix it. That's been our life. But now we're on our own in the middle of nowhere in different countries that we don't know, and James was quite fearful of things going wrong and things breaking and how we would then deal with them, and I think as time has gone on,
mainly because some things went wrong, some things broke, and we didn't know how to deal with it. I think that was the catalyst. And we had some, obviously it's a brand new camper, so things go wrong at the start and then you take them back, they fix them, and then hope you leave and everything's good to go. But I think the fact that we had something new that there were things going wrong with at the sort of step one of the trip, it took me quite a while to relax into it and think, okay, things are going to go wrong and you just deal with them when they come up.
But he's fixed pretty much everything in here now, I think, and he's got really good at fixing things and problem solving. It's been amazing. This is one transformation I've really loved seeing in James, is just seeing how well he's able to come up with solutions to problems. And I've been with James for 29 years, and to see this now I love seeing this development of him.
It's not a transformation, it's a temporary transformation. As soon as we get anywhere where I can just call someone and say, hey, you get your hands dirty because I don't want to, that is categorically happening.
It's the meals, Claire.
Yeah,
keep cooking.
What did you say?
It's the meals. Keep cooking.
Okay, no.
But yeah, that was something else that I've kind of relaxed into. The other thing is that I'm a bit of a perfectionist as well, and when you're on the road, you can't do something perfectly. I can't take it to this amazing guy in California who's going to just fix everything for me, like Tim at Scully Off Road. So you end up, I guess bodging it. We have a term called bodging it in the UK, which basically means it's kind of a fix as good as you can do with what you've got. It's not how it should be done, but it's fixed.
It functions.
It functions. So
I think it's how the Canadians do a lot.
Yeah, I think it's Canadians do everything. A Canadian fix, we'll call it. But yeah, now, I mean, when you've had a camper and then you've done a few things like that, it's no longer perfect. So therefore,
it's okay.
That perfect thing has then gone, and now you can just relax and say, okay, if this happens, I'll do that. Another funny story, and a little bit down to one of those things that wasn't a nice thing to happen. On our camper, we have our door is in two parts. The top half of the door lifts upwards, a bit like it does on an airplane when you get on the... do they go up?
No, I don't think they go up. I think they go sideways.
It's a bit, yeah. So our hinge is at the top of the door, and the top half of the door actually raises upwards. The bottom half of the door is like a normal door that opens outwards, because the camper shell is in two pieces. There's an upper and a lower, so the door has to be split in two. So usually what happens is when we raise and lower the camper, Claire's around one side, I'm around the other side, we make sure everything raises and lowers properly. We got to a campsite quite late one day. Claire needed to work, so she rushed in, tried to find out if she could log on to Wi-Fi because we didn't have any cell service. We raised the camper, went in, grabbed her computer, she ran off with that. I then lowered the camper from my side where I normally am, got in the camper and drove off. As I'm driving to our camp spot down this kind of treed track, I kept hearing this like knocking noise of branches hitting the camper, and I was like, I'm driving kind of in the middle, and you get to know your camper fairly well, and I thought there's no overhanging branches that should be hitting the camper, and the knocking was, quite a loud bang every now and again. And then I looked out of the passenger side wing mirror, and I'd forgotten to close the upper door that opens up and sticks out of the camper. And basically I'd driven down the trail and ripped the entire door off its hinges. So I got to our camp spot, and I don't know if you've ever seen 40 Towers with Basil 40, but basically he goes down on his haunches, holds his head, and just leapfrogs around like a frog, screaming at himself. That was basically me when I saw our camper, what I thought was ruined. We were with another couple from Kiss My Bay, their Instagram handle, Julien and Carol, French couple. And Julien came over and he said, I don't think it's that bad. I was like, you're kidding me. Like, the door's literally hanging off. But yeah, we managed to pull it off, unscrew the hinge, get a hammer the hinge out straight, re-put the door up, get some liquid or like putty that's a marine epoxy, fill in the holes in the door and kind of make those look as good as we can, and yeah, the door's fixed. So it's certainly something that I never did before, and now that the camper has some imperfections, I'm a lot more willing to jump in and do it.
With both of you working as you travel, any insights or tips for getting Wi-Fi or other details necessary for working on the road?
Yeah, we have lots of tips on that. We've tried all kinds of things. So the way we work now, the majority of our work we actually do using our data. And it's really, really cheap. Like at the moment, I mean, depending on country to country, at the moment, we are buying 4 gigs of data for about $6.
What?
Yeah.
Chris' eyeballs just popped out. That's crazy.
Okay. It's really, really cheap. And most of the time, it's our fastest way of having a connection. Because normally, if you're in a campsite like we are now, we have Wi-Fi. This is unusual, but there are currently 30 people here. So it's really difficult, or you're far away away from the router. I mean, we have bought a Wi-Fi extender, which has helped us sometimes, but generally because the data's so cheap, what we do now, and it's taken a while to learn this, when we arrive in a country, we buy a SIM card for every single provider in the country. So there's, at the moment in Colombia, there's 3 providers. We have a SIM card for each, and there's generally one provider who tends to have the best coverage, but sometimes when we go into little villages, they only have a cell tower for one of the smaller providers. So, we go in and we shuffle our SIM card in and out of our phones till we find which one has the best speeds, and then we do that. And use that card. In terms of reloading it, another trick we found, I think when we were in Colombia, because we couldn't seem to do it online using our credit cards. They wouldn't accept our foreign credit cards. But the absolute lifesaver, this is a great trick, is we use Zoom, which is Zoom with an X, not Zoom with a Z. And they're part of the PayPal company. And you can recharge your phone on almost all providers, it seems, throughout the world. You just enter in your phone number and it checks a provider, and then you just send it from your PayPal account using whatever method you've got loaded, comes straight from your bank or your credit card or your debit card, and then recharge your phone. And we recharge it at about 20 Canadian dollars a time, and it costs us like $1.50 Canadian to do that. So it's not free, but again, when we're running businesses on the road, the other way to go is to go to the shop and recharge it at the shop, which is what most people do, and it's free, but we can't leave at the moment. So another great reason to use Zoom to recharge our card. So typically that's what we do. Occasionally we use Wi-Fi if we don't have cell coverage. We did start off with Google Fi. Lots of people love Google Fi. It's expensive. I mean, it's super convenient, or it was super convenient, because you don't have to get a new card every time you go to a new country. If you don't speak the language, it's easier, but it is a lot more expensive. So if you can get used to using local SIMs, it's far and away the best way to go, I would say.
Yeah, the other thing with Google Fi as well, they build it as an international traveling plan. You basically sign up with Google Fi, going any country you want. It'll work with all of those countries' providers. You still just see Google Fi on your phone as the service provider. You still just pay Google Fi your monthly fee, but it just swaps over to whichever country you are. One of the other key things is obviously your scheduling and planning. So one of the nice things, or the clever things to do, is try and schedule and plan reasonably well. The better we dialed that in, the easier it became. So, if you can, and you don't need to do something every day, can you block your hours or block your appointments into chunks,
okay,
so that when you do have availability, you can kind of do all of the work. So rather than do a little bit of work each day, can you kind of get all of that booked into, say, 2-4 hour chunks at the weekend or something like that.
Okay.
With my job, it's quite easy. I'm able to schedule most of my work to one particular day when I need connectivity to send up the work. If you can work offline, then work offline, collect up all of that stuff, and then plan to be somewhere at a certain time that you can upload everything that you've done offline. But yeah, I think that the other thing is on iOverlander, and if anyone's listened to this that use iOverlander, for those of us that work, it's really beneficial if, when you leave a review, just happen to mention quality of the Wi-Fi, if there is Wi-Fi, or if there's cell service, which cell provider it was, and whether how good the cell service was. There's a few people on there that obviously work, and they always upload that, and it's great. If you look on iOverlander and you see that somewhere's got good connectivity, you can kind of relax and make your way there when you need to use it. It's a shame that you need to have connectivity, but on the flip side, it's great that you can work and earn money. And the other thing is that I find that working is really nice. It's something that provides a little bit of routine, and it gives you an extra element to your trip as well. Sometimes it's a pain, but for the most part, I'm glad that we work when we go away. I would actually rather do some work than not do any.
Okay. And then do you guys have any tips on budgeting as you travel to make sure you stay within what you had originally planned?
I would say the answer to that is no. Because we work, we're in a different situation to a lot of other people that are traveling for a year that have saved. So I think we can be much more relaxed with our expenditures. We had an idea of how much we thought it would cost us a month. So we had an idea of a 3,000 Canadian dollar, which when we looked it up, we were horrified to find out it was only worth just over 2,000 US dollars now. But yeah, we thought maybe 3,000 Canadian dollars a month. And I would say we've been under that, and we're definitely people who like to eat out. So I think South America, well, Colombia's been super cheap. Some other countries are more expensive, but no, we don't follow a strict budget.
Some of our friends do, and some of the tips I guess that they have is if you eat in the country you go to, if you're say especially from France, because obviously their cuisine's amazing. So if you're French and you try and eat like a French person, you're going to be paying a lot of money for that. So wherever it is that you're from, if you go to another country, if you are on a quite a tight budget, look at what they eat and how they eat, and eat in a similar way. That is going to save you a hell of a lot of money, because you're no longer trying to fight against what the local economy is able to, or the local providers are able to provide. The other thing as well is the fact that we move a lot, and we might do different dog legs or go out of the way to visit another town. If you're on a budget, then be more selective about where you go to, and spend more time stationary in those places and just enjoying the life and soaking up the life or the atmosphere of the place you go to. It's still traveling, but because you're not continually moving between them, you're not spending all of that money on fuel. So if you're like we were, traveling every 2 days on average, that means that you're normally as a 3 or 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hour drive. If you can not do that, and then you're just doing those 5 or 6 hour drive maybe once a week or something, that's going to considerably cut down your fuel budget. Being more flexible on, okay, we can stay here overnight. It's not lovely, it's not wonderful, but it's a parking lot, and we can go there late in the evening, park up, sleep. In the morning, we can go and leave and park up somewhere nice. Then you can be, for the most part, somewhere nice, but have a free night somewhere that maybe isn't quite as scenic. So if you have to pay for overnight accommodation, if there is any way that you can just not pay for that overnight accommodation, that's obviously going to be another way that you save quite a lot of money as well. And then that's really the bulk of it: your food, your fuel, and your accommodation. If you focus on those 3 things, everything else will kind of look after itself, I guess.
Okay, cool. So on navigation and communication, what are you using for navigation, either apps or paper maps? What tends to work best for you?
That's the other thing we bought that we didn't use. So we bought paper maps for Central America, and we never ever used them. So everything we do, we actually pretty much always use Google Maps, and we really like Google Maps because the timing of the journey is really accurate. I would say for most of the journeys in most of the countries. So what I mean by that is, if we plan a route A to B and it's 100 kilometers, if we use something like Maps.me, and I know a lot of people use Maps.me because you can use it offline, and doesn't require any data. But if you use Maps.me generally goes on a speed of 100 kilometers an hour. I don't think we've driven 100 kilometers an hour since we left the US 2 years ago. So Maps.me will give you, it's a 1 hour drive, whereas Google might say that's a 5 hour drive. Well, then you know that you're driving. If it's 5 hours to drive 100 kilometers, you know the roads are terrible. There's probably no tarmac. They may be mountainous. So it gives you really good idea of planning your drive. Because if you do Google Maps, you think it's 100k. You say, okay, we'll be there in an hour and a half. We'll have lunch. Whereas you still be driving by the time dinner time comes on some of these routes. So we found Google Maps really, really helpful. But you need connectivity to use it and for it to be accurate.
And sometimes I just want to add in there that some people don't find Google Maps to be very accurate at all, which it seems really, and I'm not saying that they're wrong, because why would they say that? But it seems really strange to us because we've used it so successfully, and we've used it in places where, you know, they are just off-road trails, or up in the very northern Colombia, up in the deserts in Punta Gallinas, or places where, you know, that you wouldn't expect, it's not a proper road, and therefore you wouldn't expect the times to be accurate. But they always have been pretty good. And like Claire says, it's a really good indication of what's coming up ahead and how bad the road might be. So yeah, some people use Maps.me, we use Google Maps. Other people, we use more obscure apps like Gaia, I think is one. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them, but we just keep it nice and simple and have used Google Maps
pretty much all the way, and we just use it on our phones that we then connect to. We have like a screen on the
Apple Play, our stereo in the truck is basically the screen on there. It just comes up with the Apple Play screen.
Yeah, it's been successful.
The other thing that we have that we use, I don't think we've hardly ever used it, is the Garmin Inreach. We bought it mainly as a safety device. If anything went wrong, we could hit an SOS button or send a text via satellite. At the moment, it tracks wherever we're going, and we have some maps up on our website so you can see where we are, or roughly where we are, because we built in a secure zone around where we actually are. And at the moment, the only thing we've had to use it for, thankfully not for any SOS purposes, but Claire, if we got somewhere with no cell reception, she was able to text work and say, hey, I can't work tonight. But yeah, other than that, we don't have anything. It always makes me laugh when I see in magazines and everyone has this almost like an airline cockpit in their truck of screens and dials and dashes and stuff like that. We just have none of that whatsoever. It's just Claire occasionally holding an iPhone in her hand and a map up on our stereo.
That's good. So let's go through some onboard necessities real quick. How much fuel can you carry? How far does that take you? And how do you calculate your fuel needs?
The fuel tank standard on a Ram 3500 is, I believe, 36 gallons. Because we have a lot, and they use the same fuel tank on all of the Ram 3500s. Because we have a long bed, the chassis of the truck is longer, so it allows us to put a longer fuel tank in there, and there's some companies that make those longer ones, so we swapped that over from 36 to 70 gallons when we first got the truck. That can, depending on how we drive, we've got a manual, so I don't think that they're quite as fuel efficient as an automatic. I'm not very good at remembering to put it in sixth gear because we don't drive that fast, and I end up in fifth usually, but sixth gear would help. And I don't really use cruise control. I don't use cruise control very much, where maybe I should do. I guess those little points are just to say that we're not particularly fuel efficient in the way that we drive, but we still get 1,000 kilometers from that tank. Last time we measured it, and that I think was in Mexico, and we don't really bother anymore. The nice thing is that we've got a largish truck, we're not pulling a heavy trailer, would have had a fairly big fuel tank, so even if we were half full or just over half full in our tank, that would be full on a normal truck, which means that you're usually within range of gas stations or something easily. If we fill it up, then we can just go through countries without needing to fill up. What do we use to calculate fuel? I just look at the fuel gauge and say, where are we going? How far is it? And how much fuel do I need to put in it? We don't get too fussy over things like that. If we're going to go off-road, say up north in Colombia through the desert, and we aren't sure what's up there, then we'll tend to fill it up before we leave, and then just roll with it from there. We don't have any extra jerry cans, or we've got a couple of gallon, I think it's either 2 or 3 gallon rotor pack Rotapacks container that we have in the back of the camper, but we use that for the cooktop and the heating diesel fuel. That would probably get us a few extra kilometers if we ran out, but yeah, otherwise we're not too fussed about that.
Okay. How much water can you carry?
Too much. So I think we have 75 gallon tank. Yeah, it's huge. And I mean,
which is for litres is just, I think it's about I think it worked out to 320 litres.
Yeah. So most of the time we just half fill it. Same as actually with the fuel tank, just half fill it. So we're not carrying the extra weight. But again, if we think we're going off somewhere and we're going to be off grid for a while and we need to do our own showering, then we have filled it a couple of times.
Okay, cool. Let's see. So what else? Philanthropy. Do you guys do any philanthropy? I think, Claire, you had mentioned you do something.
Yes. I've done a few humanitarian work projects along the way. In Nicaragua, actually when James went back to Canada last summer, I worked in a clinic down there for 5 weeks in a fairly rural, poor area, which was really, really interesting. And they, as well as having a medical clinic, they actually run a whole bunch of community projects where they provide, through donations, they provide food for the local poor people, which we distribute monthly. We do outreach diabetic clinics, which was amazing. We go into these little villages and we would do fun, engaging clinics with the diabetic population and education, as well as monitoring their diabetic conditions, and as well as distributing free medication to these people that they were getting donated mainly from the US. And they also ran a water program where a lot of people don't have access to clean water. They drink from these water wells that are heavily contaminated through various infections and from all the farmyard animals around them, which makes them really sick. And the kids often don't have either any access to water or only dirty water in their schools. So this clinic ran a program where they would provide clean water to the health centres, the community centres and the schools. And so I observed all of that, and actually after that I then started a GoFundMe page to help them expand their water program into all the schools in the area, and employ someone to run that program full time. So I actually raised enough money for them to run that program for a year after I finished, because I was so touched by the work they were doing there. It was amazing, and I hope to go back and work with them one day again. And then in Colombia, in December, I worked with an NGO called Med Global, and I worked with them on the Venezuelan-Colombian border, working with the refugees from Venezuela, which they don't have anything, but they don't have access to healthcare. So that was also an amazing experience, seeing the people there, the people that have actually come to Colombia and are trying to start a new life here, the people that have just crossed from Venezuela into Colombia. We would greet them at the bridge and we would offer medical services. There were lots of services being offered, but we would offer the medical services. And they also have this kind of, I think they call it a pendulum population, where people were actually living in Venezuela but will cross the bridge every day, twice a week, once a week, to receive medical services in Colombia, to buy their food in Colombia, do whatever they needed to do, but then go back to Venezuela because that's where they live. And there's a huge amount of the population in Venezuela that are doing that, rather than actually coming to Colombia to start a new life. So that was a great organization. And actually, because now of this coronavirus crisis, we're hopefully trying to start some telemedicine to work with the refugees in their offices in Cucuta, which is where I work with them, so we can still try and provide them some healthcare, because at the moment no volunteers obviously can travel to anywhere in the world to help these humanitarian projects that are normally staffed by people like me. So they're not only suffering from the virus, they're also suffering from all the other problems they normally face.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's awesome. Good for you. So this has been a lot of fun. Anything that we've missed?
I don't think so, no.
Well, I think we covered it all pretty much.
I think the one thing that I completely forgot to ask, or just curious about, do you guys speak Spanish?
I can pretty much say yes now. I think I've been studying it. I started studying about 6 months before we left, and I've continued to study and have lessons online throughout my trip. And so, yes, I mean, I can do medical consultations in Spanish now pretty well. I can speak. Yeah, pretty okay now.
And yeah, Claire studied it fairly hard and had teachers even before we left. She did some online stuff as well. I've never really wanted to speak Spanish or another language, so I certainly didn't study it, but I'd say I'd happily say if someone said, do you speak Spanish? I'd say, yeah, I speak a little bit, certainly more than most people. And in most situations, I can get what I would need, tell people what I need. I can have a very simple conversation with people, maybe about their family or what they do for work. But Claire is light years ahead of me, and she's got pretty good. I'm definitely a person who doesn't really care and will throw some words out there and see what sticks. so I'll be having a sentence or a conversation, and if I'm not sure of what word goes in there, I'll just put one in and then keep going, and then hopefully they'll get the gist by the end of the sentence. But yeah, Claire's really good. Inevitably as well, the other problem is, if you ever this is another thing I'd say to overlanders: if both of you want to learn a language, don't, whatever you do, let one person get ahead, because the person who is left behind is never going to be able to learn the language, because the person who is ahead always speaks the Spanish with the Spanish people, always jumps in and has the answers. They end up speaking to that person only, and you get left kind of not saying anything. Totally my fault. I never really wanted to learn Spanish, but even if I did, it would be totally my fault that I got left behind. But yeah, if there is any overlanders out there that are both keen to learn a language, make sure that you kind of stay at the same level, otherwise one of you's screwed.
Good advice.
Let's wrap it up with some fun facts about you.
Okay.
What keeps your co-driver occupied on long drives?
Being terrified of missing the turning and being shouted at by the driver.
That'll keep you occupied.
It seems so easy to me, because that's all you've had to do in the last 2 hours is look for that turn. But inevitably, 2 hours of sitting there doing nothing, you tend to drift off into somewhere else. We listen to some podcasts, music.
Yeah, talk.
Do you play any musical instruments on the road or around the campfire at night?
No.
Oh, there's nothing that winds me up when someone walks over with a guitar and I'm like, oh no, please. Unless you're like Van Halen, just go and put it back in the caravan or in your trailer or in your motorhome. If someone comes over and says, like, you know, can I play this, then great. But that happens very rarely. But no, we don't. I used to be a DJ back at home. So a couple of people have said, oh, have you got anything that you can DJ with, like on your iPad or phone? But I never have, other than setting up a playlist maybe. But no, and Claire, there is no way Claire's great at learning Spanish. There is no way in a million years Claire is learning a musical instrument. Yeah.
I have no rhythm.
No, not at all. She's brilliant at many things, but music isn't one of them.
What's your favorite drink in the morning to get you going?
Coffee.
Tea.
Coffee.
Tea.
Coffee.
One of each.
One of each. Claire's tea obsessed, to the point where she's woken up at night and I said, oh, are you okay? And she thought it was the morning, and the only thing she said, tea. So that's her thing. And
it has to be British tea, which is proving really worrying, because my stores are really diminishing now, and we're trapped, and Amazon aren't delivering either. So I don't know what's going to happen in a couple of weeks.
Well, it's a good thing you have that Inreach.
Yeah.
I need to call for help.
Send us some Yorkshire tea. For me, I love coffee. And then I was really excited about Central America and coffee. Oh, they're going to have such amazing coffee. And then we got there and the coffee was just not very good. They drink tinto, which is mainly medium roasted, and they quite like sweet because they don't add milk or sugar or anything. So it kind of tastes a bit floury, and I was hugely disappointed. So So in the US, you get all of the good stuff, and Italy and France and everywhere else, and the coffee and stuff that you have in the US is equally as good as the best coffee anywhere else. So don't feel that if you go to these countries, you're going to find this epic stash, unless you go to Pueblo Bello, which is the town I mentioned before up in the mountains where the indigenous tribe was. We went there and I had the best coffee I've ever tasted, and it was about just under $4 for a half a kilo or a pound of coffee.
Nice.
Yeah, that was great. So every now and again we hit a town, I find somewhere that does exceptional coffee and buy loads of it. But generally it's not the rule of thumb that you go somewhere and get great coffee.
Solid advice. We better write that down.
I'm thinking they have a secret ingredient.
Secret?
Yeah, it's the best coffee. Somewhere out in the jungle.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh yeah, I think it's just super fresh. And then literally it goes from the tree to being roasted to being in your cup kind of in a day. So that can be no, it doesn't go from the tree. Obviously you have to be dried up, but the process is super quick. So you're getting really, really fresh stuff. But yeah, it's equally as good in the best coffee shops in the US. So enjoy that.
Cool. What's a favorite beverage at night to wind down after a long day on the road?
Rum.
Yeah, rum. It's got to be rum.
Ooh. Yeah. The rum that we've bought has been really good. In each country we go to, we kind of look at. I mean, Mexico was good, not because they make rum, but because it was insanely cheap. So that was good. And then Nicaragua, one of our favorite rums is Flor de Caña. I became a little bit, not obsessed with rums, but I looked up a best rums in the world website, and then I've been ticking a few of those off. In Guatemala, they did Zacapa.
Zacapa, yeah, something like that.
Zacapa 23, which was really, really nice. In Colombia, they do a Roncaldas de Viejo. Usually with rum, I find 5 years is kind of the tipping point where it gets nicer, and then 7 and upwards gets better and better. But yeah, rum's our probably favorite drink.
And what is your best advice to aspiring overlanders like us?
Just do it.
Yeah.
Honestly, just do it with whatever you've got, and don't put it off for too long, because you just don't know what's around the corner. I know that sounds terrible, but some people plan, and we know people, and I'm not going to mention any names, but we know people that before us were planning on doing these overland trips, and they still haven't left, and they have the vehicle, some of them, but they're still planning and they're still waiting for everything to be perfect. And I trust me, nothing is ever perfect, and if you have the opportunity, just do it. And if it's something you want to do in the future, then you need to be careful with the choices you make now to allow you to have the freedom to do that in the future, whether that's, don't have a mortgage, don't have a child, have a job that maybe you can work remotely, or you can take a sabbatical from, or a job that you decide you want to leave. But I think be careful with your planning if you can't leave now, and if you do have the opportunity to leave, well, not now because no one can go anywhere at the moment, but once this is over, do it.
And the other thing I would say is money should not be a factor. Of course, there is going to be an amount of money that you need to live for an amount of time, but people get so caught up in, we've seen people that say, we need to save up, and they've bought a $300,000-$500,000 vehicle. I was like, well, no, you just needed a cheaper vehicle. You don't need to save up at all. Yeah, we meet people that have got the most basic vans, or in just a car with sleeping bags, and they fold the seats down and they go away for a couple of months, and their budget is microscopic. But guess what? They're at the same beaches we are. They're up the same mountains that we are. They're at the same campgrounds we are. They're doing all of the same stuff. They're seeing all of the same stuff. They're enjoying all of the things that we enjoy, and they're just doing it on a significantly smaller budget. So don't let money be a factor. Be realistic about the money that you can save up. Choose a vehicle that suits that budget. Don't start going to Expo and dreaming of the ultimate vehicle, because you just don't need it. and then just do it, pull the trigger. And it doesn't matter if you only go, and you don't have to do the epic thing straight away. It can be a month or 2 months or 3 months or whatever it is, but just get out there and do it. And once you do it, you will understand. I wish that we'd gone overlanding for a time before we did overlanding. I'm not sure what we would have changed. Maybe we would have changed a few things, but it would have been great experience to really give us confidence in the vehicle that we got. I think that especially in the US, there's so much emphasis placed on the whole off-road recovery, all of that gear that you have to buy. And in reality, as soon as you leave the US, hardly anyone has any of that stuff or needs any of that stuff. We have a lot of it because we thought we needed it. We've used hardly any of it. We do go on trails. We do go on beaches. Or the people that don't have it, they get stuck. The locals pull them out. That's how it works. So yeah, that's the thing I would say is don't hold off, don't wait, don't try and save up for the epic thing. Just get stuck in, jump in and do it while you can.
There's so much consumerism that goes on in the developed world, and we're being advertised and sold to that you need all of these things, not just for overlanding, for everyday life. And one thing traveling teaches you, or overlanding teaches you, is that you don't need that stuff. You really don't. You just need a sense of adventure and just to go out there. And if you don't have the right stuff, you'll find a way, or someone will help you out, and you'll have an even better experience for not having that stuff.
There's a guy on Instagram, I can't remember his name, but I'll send it over. He would be an amazing person for a podcast. He's done the whole Pan American in a tuk-tuk with his partner and a dog.
Perfect. That is awesome.
So
you can do, if you do it with a tuk-tuk, then there's no reason you can't do it with anything else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and they've left to go home, and of course they've got a tuk-tuk, so everyone else is worried about what to do with their vehicle. He just said, I just drove to the airport and left it there. that was it. So really I'll pass you his details. It'd be amazing. Please photographs do. On Instagram. But yeah, I mean, if you can do it in a tuk-tuk all the way through to one of those massive man trucks, pick your poison and just run with it.
Yeah, that's good. So how can people learn more about you and what you guys are doing and kind of keep up with your travels?
We have, like all travelers, we like taking photos, and Instagram's a great place to kind of see where we've been and get a more visual rather than a long blurb. But Instagram.com/thisbigroadtrip. We also have a website, thisbigroadtrip.com, where we have some blog posts, but they're not the usual we went here, we went there blog posts. I normally only write a blog post if there is a theme that I get to write about. So in Mexico, I wrote about the people. In Guatemala, I wrote about the Mayans. So we tend to not have a generic, here's where we went and what we did. It's also got our route and stuff on the website so people can see which towns we stayed in as well. Facebook.com/thisbigroadtrip is kind of a cross between those two. We put more stuff up there and just a bit more chit-chatty about where we've been. And we also just started a YouTube channel, which has got a few couple of videos on there at the moment, but it's something I've been getting into a little bit more. So yeah, look on our tag on YouTube, surprisingly, is This Big Road Trip. It also has on there the Colombian bridge trail that we did with Kiss My Bay. That was a really, really great trip. So that's kind of a fun video to watch. And we've got a US one on there, and there'll be more to come soon as well. Okay, cool. Any more information you'd like to give or useful resources that our listeners should check out? No, I don't think so. Yeah, I would, if you're interested in going if you're overlanding, you know all of the things anyway. If you're interested in going overlanding, a really good resource is Facebook groups. There's one in particular for the Pan American called Pan American Travelers Association. That's got a whole bunch of newbies on there asking questions, experienced people asking questions, but more importantly, experienced people answering questions. So we have people that go up on there that say, which car should I buy, which is obviously opens up a whole can of worms, but it's people who have no knowledge go on there and ask questions as well. So if you're interested in finding out a little bit more, certainly about this part of the world, then that's a good place to go on to. Some people ask us how we find campsites. Overlander is a good resource, but also whenever you're driving around, just keep an eye out, because you'll see some places, and some of our best campsites have been ones that we've just stumbled across that aren't on Overlander at all.
And the other one is Wiki Overland, which is really, really good for things like what do you do at the borders, what requirements, visa requirements, truck requirements, safety requirements, insurance requirements. So it's a good website. It's often a website I'll check before we do a border crossing, just so I have copies of all the documents, make sure we have everything we need, make sure those border crossings go nice and smoothly. So that's another good resource.
Okay, cool.
Thank you so much for your time. We're humbled that you've given us such an amazing look into your world, experiences, and knowledge. Safe travels and adventures to you, and we hope to catch up with you in the future.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. We enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.